Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you're doing well. Thank you. Thank you. I see many people coming to the Zoom room right now. Welcome. Very excited to be here with you all. We'll have about 45 minutes together in that presentation, then we'll move to more of a breakout rooms for one-on-one conversation. My name is Nancy, and I'm working with the Career Innovation Project here at Railroad University. And I have some of my colleagues in the room with me. Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Heather, for being here and helping me with that session. As we get started, let's acknowledge the traditional lands that we're on. So Railroads University is on the land of the Lackawangan-speaking people, also known as the Songhe and Esquimalt Nation. So it's with deep gratitude that we love, learn, play, work, study on those lands where Indigenous and non-Indigenous folks come together. If you know the Indigenous land that you're joining us from, please put them in the chat, as well as introduce yourself, maybe the program you're in, and what you're looking forward to learn today from our panelists. So today, very exciting times. So we have 4 panelists, 4 employers for you to talk with and to learn from. I'll just quickly introduce them, and then, of course, they will be able to give you an overview of who they are and their organization. So we have Annette Geer, who is a senior environmental manager with Graham Construction. Annette is also a graduate from Railroad University in what we call the MEM program, Master of Environment and Management. And she works for Graham and Construction, and she is the lead, actually, of the environmental and sustainability, I should say, team. We also have Heather here, who is a health and safety and environment manager at South Country Co-op Limited. And Heather has worked with some railroads students in the past, which is exciting for you all. And that organization gives a lot back to the community, and the organization is part of Alberta Top 75 Employers and is a member-owned cooperative. So I'm looking forward to learn more about what that means. We also have Marc D'Entremont, who is a senior wildlife biologist at LGL Limited. And on top of that, I met with Marc last week, and we were chatting about all the cool project he's doing over there. But on top of it, Marc is also involved at Railroads University as an associate faculty, and also is a supervisor of some of the research program. So again, good connection for you all. And the last, not the least, Marc Anson, a founder of Timber Tales. Marc and I met a month ago now at a summit, economic summit in Nanaimo, and Marc was introducing his company as an impact company for that conference. So that was very, very fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to learn all your good advice, Marc. And yeah, so Timber Tile is a local and sustainable business on Vancouver Island, doing a lot of good stuff, having a lot of employees, and yeah, project across BC, and I think across maybe Canada as well. So we'll hear from Marc in a minute. And just for you to know, the Career Learning and Development Department, we're here to support you as student, as graduate. So please feel free. You see here on the list all the different resources you can access. I bet that you found Career Roads because you register for that event. But I think as we move forward, really that's a very good first step for any student to connect with the Career Center, just to build not only your resume, right? It's not just about resume, cover letter. It's about how can you network, how can you learn from our alumni network. Many skills and tools you can develop, and my colleagues know so much about it. And I'd like to let you know as well that we have an event coming up on December 4th. So that week will be the Railroad Climate Action Week. And we have an Employers Connect on the 4th afternoon. And we'll have as well a big career fair on campus here, February 29. So that's it for me now. And let's get started with our panelists here. our panelists here. So Annette, would you like to introduce yourself here as we get started, please? Maybe like a 5 minutes on who you are and what your organization does.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me today. As Nancy said, my name is Annette Geer, and I am the Senior Environment Manager at Graham Construction. I have been with Graham for just about 6 years now. Basically, I take care of everything from our permitting and approvals, site compliance, risk management, our environmental management system at the company, and that includes our operations in both Canada and the United States. So when I came on at Graham 6 years ago, there was just me. Now we have a team of 8. I've got a couple of postings up right now for a project, and we know we'll be doing a few more. So obviously over the last 6 years, it's really evolved. In the construction industry, you know, before I came on, we relied entirely on consultants. I think moving forward, it's going to be a bit of both. Like we want to have some in-house staff that can do sort of day-to-day on projects, and then we'll always have environmental consultants that would bring, you know, the specialists, the biologists, ecologists, whatever it is that we're doing. So Graham Construction is a Canadian founded company. We were actually founded in 1926, so we're soon going to hit our 100th anniversary. They're a construction company. We started in Saskatchewan. Proud to say we're fully employee owned, which is really nice as well. And I mean, we have operations pretty much from Ontario west in Canada, and then sort of in the, I'd say the west coast, Midwest of the United States. And then just a couple of years ago, we also purchased a company that operates out of Colorado and California. So lots of opportunity. The project that I'm hiring for right now happens to be in the Yukon. So, you know, we build projects pretty much everywhere. The company is made up of sort of 4 divisions. So we have a buildings group, and they would do commercial type buildings. So hospitals, apartments, commercial real estate, that type of stuff. We have our infrastructure group, which does pretty much any kind of infrastructure. A lot of what we do are highways, like we're just doing in Edmonton and Calgary, parts of the ring roads. We did the Regina Bypass, which was a ring road in Saskatchewan. We do a lot of sort of light rail work in some in Edmonton right now, a lot in Ontario for a client called Metrolinx. Then we also have our industrial group. So they would be heavy industrial, so oil sands. We'll also do mining, like a lot of the potash mining and stuff in Saskatchewan. Some of the heavy mining in different locations and in the US. And then our 4th division is, we call it M&T, so it's maintenance and turnaround. So a lot of those same sort of industrial type clients, but we're on site all the time doing any type of maintenance or big turnaround work. Could be pipe replacements, could be pipe upgrades. So it's a pretty diverse scope of work. And you can imagine as the environmental requirements keep coming, how the company has to react to those is different. Like every project, we need to be evaluating the risk and what our scope of work is going to be from an environmental perspective. When we're bidding a job, as soon as we're awarded a job, we're creating environmental management plans, water management plans, noise and vibration, underwater hydroacoustics. It really depends on the type of project, but there's no shortage of environmental requirements for many of these projects. So what we're aiming to do is, like I said, complement with an in-house staff and then a lot of experts coming from a consulting firm, and really make sure that we're positioned well for the future. The other little thing that Nancy touched on is in the last about 2 years, Graham has really switched from a corporate social responsibility to a more established sustainability program that's based on ESG. So I've also kind of taken that on. We're going to be growing that group as well in sort of the next year or so, but we've gone through doing our materiality assessment, stakeholder engagements, identifying the key areas that we want to focus on, and then we've developed our sort of roadmap for the next, I'll say 15 to 20 years. So we did kind of year 1, years 2 through 5, and then 5 onward, identifying, you know, under each of those pillars, whether it's DEI metrics, greenhouse gas inventory. That was probably one of our big accomplishments. In 2022, we actually published a greenhouse gas inventory for all of our fleet and facilities. And when I say fleet, actually everything that took any type of fuel, so everything from a handheld chainsaw up to the big 777 trucks that were running in Fort McMurray. So it was It was an undertaking. It probably took us about a year to even get everything kind of all in one place, and then trying to determine how we could get the data, whether it was telemetrics on the newer equipment, if it was fuel burn, if it was hour meters. So it was nice to get it done. We're actually going to try and bring on some of our partner companies this year and start looking at our Scope 3 emissions, because some of those we're estimating and just don't have data for right now, but that's kind of where we're headed. Graham hires a lot of students, whether it's environmental or just other project related. So I would say if anybody is looking, we usually do our recruiting sort of now for the spring terms, not to say we couldn't fill something sooner. And then, so we usually have students coming on basically every semester, and they'll come anywhere from sort of a 4-month work term up to a full 12-month work term. I feel like I probably talked for more than 5 minutes, and I'm happy to answer more questions later.
No, you're on time. That's great. Thanks, Annette. Yeah. And we'll go with Heather. Would you like to introduce yourself and the organization?
Thanks very much, Nancy. My name is Heather Smith-Schenkey. I'm the Health, Safety, Environment Manager for South Country Co-op Limited. Our corporate office is based in Medicine Hat, Alberta. We are a diverse retail organization in the corner of Alberta. We have operations from Calgary south over to Lethbridge, the American border, right down to the Saskatchewan border. We have 54 sites in our communities. They're made up of retail grocery stores, gas bar convenience stores, bulk petroleum, agriculture, hardware, as well as we have some automotive services, tire shops, things like that. Pharmaceutical and liquor are additional businesses. South Country Co-op is a member of the co-op retailing service. So from Ontario right through to the BC border, most people will recognize FCL, Federated Cooperatives Limited. So we are a member under them, but each co-op is member-owned, operated. We have our own board of directors, etc. In my wheelhouse, some people say, well, what possibly could you have to do with the environment? And so our first is, of course, most often it comes up in our bulk energy services. The old fossil fuels and what's going on with fossil fuels and some alternatives and things like that. But in all of our other business units as well, we've been impacted by the Canadian Plastics Act, those single plastic use items, things like that. The energy, so bulbs and refrigerations, those utility costs and all of that. So environmental was added as a natural fit, they felt, into this health and safety wheelhouse. We have a number of business units in which we need to meet E2 compliance. So there's a lot of reporting and stuff that goes on there. So you see, Annette, I won't take my whole 5 minutes for the little bit of extra you wanted today. We did have a student pre-COVID who came and did a very exciting work placement with us. We, as an organization, we're big into community support. We're one of those companies that our board of directors every year has designated a certain percentage of our entire budget goes to the community and things like that. So that's co-op.
And sorry, Heather, I didn't ask you in advance, but I think I saw on the website there's you work with Indigenous communities as well, right?
We absolutely do.
Yeah.
Yes, diversity, inclusion, and equity are one of our high strategic plans right now. It's one of the pillars. Actually, environmental is another pillar. But yeah, we are working very hard on that as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll move to Marc D'Entremont. If you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us about the company and then about what you do at Railroads, please.
Certainly. Yeah, thanks, Nancy. Yeah, so hi, everyone. So my name is Marc D'Entremont. I am a wildlife biologist with LGL Limited. So LGL is a medium-sized, employee-owned consulting company. We specialize in kind of environmental and applied biological research, management, conservation type work. We are spread out across North America. We have an office where I'm sitting, which is in Sydney, just north of Victoria. We have two offices in Ontario, one in King City, just north of Toronto, and one in Cambridge, and a fourth office in St. John's, Newfoundland. And then we also have operations in Texas and in Washington State. So we're kind of spread out, but like I say, fairly medium to smallish in size. The specific work that we do, it varies by the different regions. So here in the West, like I say, we do a lot of applied biological research and conservation, focusing on fish and wildlife biology, work in the marine environment. And that's kind of throughout British Columbia and to Alberta and Yukon and Northwest Territories as well. And in the work in Ontario is focused a bit more on municipal work. So working with the various municipalities in the southern Ontario there, high focus on kind of the environmental planning and permitting type work and support. And whereas the work in St. John's, likewise, it's really heavy focus on the offshore marine environment, kind of supporting the offshore oil and gas activities that are out there, both the operations and exploration work in terms of seismic. And the work in Texas, again, heavy focus on the marine environment with marine fisheries and sea turtles. A lot of work in the Gulf of Mexico, again, with the associated with the offshore oil and gas work there. And Washington, heavy focus on sturgeon in the Columbia River. So that's the big one there. Yeah, so as a consulting company, we have diversity of clients. We try to focus in on our main skills, like I say, with sort of applied biology. But our client base is quite large. So we'll service here in the West a lot of First Nation groups, but we also work with all levels of government, industry, even non-for-profit groups as needed. So we're happy to apply our skills to help anybody who wants to work with us. So we have a very flat kind of organizational structure. So it's also, the collaboration and sharing work across regions is quite easy for us to do. We can communicate quite effectively. Just in terms of my association with Railroads, as Nancy said, so I'm currently an associate faculty member. I supervise students in the Masters of Environment Management program, and I'm also a graduate of that program myself. I did my master's with Railroads 20 years ago. I'm happy to be part of the school going forward. And I also been teaching a bit of one of the online courses through the master's program here in the last couple of years. So yeah, that's kind of LGL and me in a nutshell. So thanks.
Very interesting. Yeah, thank you. And Marc, Anson, thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. So my name is Marc Anson, and I'm trained as an architect and a builder, but I'm also the founder of Timber Tiles. And I see, Sean, that you're coming from Halifax. I did my master's of architecture in Halifax. Love it over there. So for about the last decade, I've been working in the forest industry, looking for design-based solutions to some of the challenges that the forest industry has. And that ended up stemming into a project to build kind of Canada's greenest house. And It's a house which is targeted LEED Platinum and Passive House standards, and really trying to push the threshold on what is an ecological house. And while working on that project, my son challenged me. He's like, Dad, nice house, but it's not available to people. It's kind of like this architect's house up on the hill. And so instead, I kind of pivoted and started to design timber tiles, which is essentially like a wooden widget. It's just a piece of wood that goes on the wall, but we're embedding a tremendous amount of story in it to try to spread the word about environmental responsibility. So we are an Indigenous company. We're 75% owned by the Hawaiian First Nations on Vancouver Island. And we're developing an eco-friendly wall tile, which is really targeting a biophilic response in people. We're trying to get more wood into spaces to create healthier environments. And then, with the work that I had in architecture, I just applied it to the idea of building a factory. So we're a zero waste factory, and we are going for Living Product Challenge certification, which is really arduous to get. And it's through these certifications that we are trying to demonstrate that better building practices can lead to a healthier world, right? So that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm mostly wearing a hat as the founder of Timber Tiles on Port Alberni. And, I think that, I just needed 2 minutes, 1 minute. I'm open for discussion. I'd rather have a discussion than a description.
I love that, totally. And that's the fun thing with railroads. Yeah, we're looking for careers and internship, but sometimes, I talk for myself, and I'm sure many of you, I know that even some of you are mentioning that you're starting your program in January. So good for you for being here before even the program starts. I'm very impressed. But yeah, most of the time we'll have apply learning or research project to do. So instead of doing it in something that doesn't exist, like reaching out to new entrepreneurs or folks in the room, it's just wonderful when you can work on a real life challenge and do something and then submit it to the business. So perfect. And I invite anyone who has questions to start, like maybe putting them in the chat. We can look at this. I know a few students send me questions in advance. And something I'm always interested in learning is, what is one advice would you give to a student who is interested in a career in your industry? So maybe one or two advice each, but what will it be like for student listening right now and being like, oh, I don't know what life will bring me in 2024, 2025 when I graduate. I don't, and we can do the popcorn style. You can just go when you want.
I'll go first. Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. I think the first piece of advice I'd give anybody that's starting out and thinking about their career, whether it's in construction or any industry, is regardless of the task that they give you when you get there, it may not make sense at the time, but chances are it'll serve you well later. My first summer job when I finished way back when I started my career, I was actually working for Thurber Engineering in their soils lab. So I was doing strength tests on concrete and liquid limits and plastic limits on soil. I had done like 2 courses in university, didn't really know what I was doing, but that's what they hired me to do. And at the time I smelled like sulfur because they were still capping things with sulfur at the time. And I was like, why am I doing this? And, I ended up working for an environmental consulting firm, and I was working in assessment and remediation, and we were really looking at contaminant fate. All of a sudden, all those liquid and plastic limits made so much sense in trying to figure out how fast contaminants were going to move through the soil. And then much later on, working for even here, understanding the concrete process and the strengths and how that happens. And so it was crazy. Like at the time I was thinking, why would I need to know this? So regardless of how far a stretch from what you think you want to do some of these experiences are, take them and build the relationships with the people along the way. Ask all the questions you want to ask, because one day you'll be like, oh, now I know why I had to do that or why I learned that.
Yeah, good advice. I'll jump in and add to that. My advice would be, don't get discouraged because you're about to slam yourself into a brick wall. When it comes to environmental discussions, I am amazed at how few people still care. So I was just in a meeting with the founder of the LEADS program in the United States, and they were saying that about 10% of construction projects right now have some sort of an environmental requirement that goes beyond kind of essentially building code. And I'm finding that I will go out there and tell people, oh, this is a fantastic environmental product with all these great attributes. And really, they just want to know, is it cheaper? Is it faster? Is it easy to install? And that's what I keep running into. So what's important for you in taking this environmental program that you're doing is just know that you're pushing uphill, and it's worth it. Like, it's got to be worth it. But I'm constantly surprised that it's not obvious to everyone yet. So my advice would just be persevere and keep at it.
My advice for everyone supports both of the previous panelists. I suggest continue with the lifelong learning and be a generalist rather than a specialist. The more flexible you can be, know a little bit about a lot of things in the industry, makes you be that industry professional that's sought after. Instead of just focusing on one specific piece.
Yeah, I'll just add, I'll get a bit more specific. So I just noticed in the chat, there's, seems to be several folks that are in the environmental practice program. So my advice is, if you haven't done this already, make sure you understand the legislation and regulations that are applicable to your area of interest, and even beyond. And if you haven't done so already, and if you have the opportunity, take a law course, or like an introductory to law or something like that. As I mentioned, I did my master's at Railroads, and we did a law program course then, and I found it enlightening just in terms of understanding both how, municipal bylaws fit into provincial legislation, which fits into federal legislation, and understanding that flow, and then the regulations and policies that come out of that. So having that sort of basis of understanding will certainly help you when you're trying to, either do your work or provide support to, clients, for example, that are also navigating these sort of complicated areas of legislation and whatnot. So.
Yeah, great one, Marc. And if I can continue to build on what you mentioned, when you say you have your master from Railroad, were you thinking or envisioning your career to be like a straight line, or was it a straight line, or have you been pivoting and like changing direction? Because I think that's a question students often see. Oh, I'll do my master or my bachelor and then get there. But I think some of you mentioned sometimes we have to adjust.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always had a goal of being a biologist, and I was a biologist when I did my master's, and maintained that throughout the career. But as a environmental consultant, the work I do definitely pivots around that, and like I say, a lot of my clients are Indigenous groups, and their needs vary as well, and I'm also sort of navigating things on their behalf. So I've certainly had to pivot a lot. Some, skills and experience that I've gained over the years has definitely helped me with that. But I've also, as part of a company like LGL, I'm also able to go, well, I don't have that specific expertise, and say in fisheries, for example, but I can just walk down the hall and talk to my fisheries biologist. I can, so we can work together in that regards to, service clients and sort of help things out. But definitely there's been lots of twists and turns, but you kind of always just sort of come back to your core, skill set and level of knowledge and understanding that you do have, but also being able to, think critically and apply that to, solving problems as they arise.
Anyone else wants to jump in about that question on how does your career look like over the past 10, 20 years? Was it what you expected, or did you take some chances here and there?
Mine was definitely, well, I guess to say that it turned out the way I thought, I don't know if I really had a clear idea what I was going to be doing. I finished high school, I was looking for something to do, toyed with a few things, enjoyed the science part, so I ended up environmental science. I'm like, okay, that sounds like a really cool career. Did I really know what I'd be doing on a day-to-day basis? I'll be honest, I don't think I did. And mine's been pretty diverse. So I did a 3-year co-op engineering, environmental engineering technology diploma from Newfoundland, and thought, 3 years of school is enough. I'm going to go to work. Moved to Alberta, worked in consulting. It was great. I did, like I said, a lot of contaminated sites type work, but I also felt I was kind of limited with an engineering technology diploma. So went back to school, did an undergrad, a BSc in environment, worked again, went back later, did my master's, and I mean, I've had maybe more diverse than a lot of people, or more than it should have. But like I said, I started in contaminated sites management, ended up working for a consulting firm that was doing a lot of ISO environmental management systems and quality management systems. So I did that for a while, went to the city of Edmonton, helped them build 8 environmental management systems, and was their lead auditor for a couple of years. From there, I went and worked in-house in the concrete cement aggregate industry for, they're Hanson materials now. At the time, they were Lehigh Hanson. So I was in their environment manager for Region Canada. Definitely a different industry. After my master's and stuff, I've actually held a position as a vice president of an environmental services group for a consulting firm, and then enjoyed that, but I actually wanted to go back and do something like in the industry and work for a company, and ended up at Graham Construction. So it has definitely been a windy, all over the place kind of road. Wouldn't change a thing. And a few years ago, because much like Heather's group, we're combined health, safety, and environment. So because I was hounding all these safety guys to go do some environmental training, I actually went and took safety training and became a CRSP on top of that. So the lifelong learning, yes, I'll probably go back one more time and do something else too. But it's certainly, if someone had asked 19-year-old me what I'd be doing, 30 years later, it definitely wouldn't have been sitting doing what I'm doing right now. I don't think so.
Yeah, lifelong learning. I just applied to MIT to take yet another course. That's an 8-week course. And I mean, how can you stop, right? You have to be learning all the time, especially in the environmental sector, because you can't look back on the last 30 years as precedents as to how you're going to run your career. Your career is going to be completely new from anything that we've done in the past. And that's a pretty exciting way to be approaching your work. In the construction industry, I don't know if any of you have an interest in construction, but things like EPD and LCAs are going to explode in the marketplace. And we're only we've had some of the early adopters have got in there and kind of paved the way, but pretty soon they're going to become mainstream. And there's certainly, like, EPDs are mainstream in Europe, and I require them even to sell my product into Europe. So it's I think going to be super exciting for anybody in an environmental career over the next decade or two. So yeah, your careers, I think, are probably going to be pivoting all the time. Mine's pivoted lots, but that's just part of life.
I think it just feels good to get reassured that it's okay and that there's a lot of potential out there. And a little bit, Bill, on what you just mentioned, Marc, too. Someone was asking me before the event is, do you see any adjustment, or what is your organization doing to kind of fight climate change or adapt to climate hazard, or what's going on in the world right now? Would you have specific example of what your company do?
Is that for me, Marc, or other Marc?
From you, because you were saying, we have specific training to take and you're going to MIT. Like, do you have any recommendation for students, like just learning about climate action, for example, or even sustainability? Because at Railroad, we try to tell people, don't add sustainability just as a lens, like really embed it in the project you work on. Would you agree?
I would. I mean, I think that so much of it right now is in education vocabulary, so that we're all having the same discussion. And that's essentially why I'm going back to school, is to learn the latest vocabulary on a lot of these topics. The conference that I was just in with Living Building and Wellness and Leads, it was really discussing how do we clean up this mess, because there are so many programs that have popped up over the last decade, and they all have tremendous amounts of overlap and therefore redundancy. And we're just trying to make some kind of cohesive sense out of it all. and really that, the mess is going to befall the people who are starting their careers in environmental practice right now, to make sense of the leadership before them, because the leadership has been all over the place, right? So that's why I'm going back to school. And so, yeah, my recommendation would be learn everything you can about everybody's system, because essentially they're all trying to do the same thing. Yeah, it's complicated.
And as that legislation changes, it was already spoke of earlier today, municipal versus your provincial versus your federal. They're not all getting along. They're not all the same. A couple of us are in the province right now that are really barking and fighting back on some of this. In our world, most people will talk about bulk fuel services from a co-op. Well, those fossil fuels, talk about pivoting. That is the largest in the co-op retailing system. Those fossil fuels coming out of the refineries are one of the largest business units. And so we've already pivoted kind of right from federated down, looking at biofuels, all kinds of things. In many of our gas bars, we already have the EV charging stations, and some other people, because again, co-op is often perceived as coming from that grassroots farmer-like organization, not up there cutting edge or leading. And the question will be, you guys are in the fuel business. What are you doing with EV charging stations? And things like that. So that, I called it flexibility, but that ability to pivot and understand. Energy sourcing right now, we December 8th will open a brand new card lock, and we are energizing that entire site and anticipate feeding onto the grid with solar panels. We're the first co-op in the CRS to be doing that, and things like that. So pivot.
Do you want to add anything, Annette? I saw you're unmuted. You're good.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, and I see in the chat there's a great question from Camille. And I see, Marc, you answer, and I'll make sure to share the chat with the people watching the recording. But I think it's something we hear a lot from students is when you hire, or if like when you got hired yourself, like what's the importance of technical skills versus soft skill for the person applying? And we can even build on that to say, when you hire someone, what would you, of course, you'll be looking at the resume and the cover letter, but how can students really shine and showcase what they're learning?
Yeah, I'll speak specifically to that. So one thing, like when we look at potential candidates to hire in terms of like full-time positions and even co-op positions and maybe more so with the full-time stuff, people that have a master's degree certainly pique our interest, not just because they've done a specific project and but it's more about, they've gone down their program, they've been able to actually get a project done. And so we here at LGL, and the staff that are kind of doing the hiring have gone through that process, and they understand what it takes to, to manage that kind of work on your own. So that I guess, builds those soft skills that don't necessarily come out on paper. So again, like I said, it's a really important part of the process, and it's really important that the students here are in fact kind of pursuing that goal, because it definitely pays off, and we certainly recognize it. So.
In our industry, we're looking for people, those competencies, business insight, the communicating effectively. That's a soft skill that is extremely important in our industry. Tech savvy is up there. We look for things like managing complexity, driving vision and purpose. Situational adaptability is important for us. Cultivating innovation is important to us as well, and being resilient.
I love that. Thank you. And I think I have another question here, and then maybe we'll move to breakout rooms, because I know a few folks are asking if they can have some one-on-one moment. I have a question in the chat. What kind of certification is generally required to be considered eligible for hiring environmental practice? Can someone with a degree in communication, I think you talked about it, Heather, just now, can someone with a degree in communication, for instance, get a chance?
In our industry, yes, if they have that education, absolutely. But if they have some transferable work-related skills as well, absolutely.
I mean, I think for us, there may be opportunities thinking that way, probably more on the sustainability side for us. When I really look at our environmental staff, I mean, most times right now, like we bid a job in the spec, it'll say your environmental monitor needs to have a minimum bachelor's degree, 5 years of experience, or 3 years of experience. So it's very, very prescriptive. So I don't mean to discourage anybody, but it's really going to depend on the role that you need to fill in that organization. So for me, first thing I ask everybody is, do they have a professional designation, or are they eligible to get one at some point? We definitely, like I said, will take students. We had a student this summer. We had some funding through Eco Canada to kind of do some training. But so, I mean, they didn't have any experience. They had just finished a master's program. But the thing was, we knew, 3 years, 5 years from now, they could fill that role. And there are, openings. So like I said, I wouldn't want to discourage anybody, but for our industry, we very much need people that can have a professional designation, whether it's a professional biologist, professional agrologist, engineers, but it's very important for a lot of the stuff that we do.
I have lots of letters behind my name, and it doesn't really interest me that much. So when we're all really passionate when we're working together, and so the work that we do is quite menial, and we're looking for others to understand that it's also really meaningful. So when we're hiring, and I'm always involved in hiring, we're trying to hire for a mosaic of people, because that seems to create the most interest and dialogue and working experience and stuff. So I would say the soft skills are really important. But yeah, you won't even get the interview if you haven't done some education. It's just the reality of it for us, right?
Yeah, I'll just add, like similar to Annette, we're looking for professionals that can have a designation, and that's primarily because we have this Professional Governance Act here in British Columbia that kind of stipulates, the accountability requirements and whatnot. That said, though, we also have staff that don't have like a biology degree or anything like that, and are just, really effective communicators and coordinators and managers and like project managers. So we also value those kinds of people if they're the right fit.
Yeah, thanks for that. And that's a good point too, Annette, when you mentioned Eco Canada. And I know some students hear about them, and I'll make sure to share the list, because you can be an environmental practitioner in training and then get your EP certification, and they do tons of events and other kind of workshop that all students can participate in, and again connect with the community, connect and build their network and skills. I see that we're at 4:51. I don't see more questions. Many thanks in the chat. So I think if you all agree, I'll just open the breakout room. So every breakout rooms will have a name to it. So you will see Marc is there, Annette, Marc, and Heather. So all of you, just don't be shy. You can just go introduce yourself, just say what you're looking for. If you have any specific question, I'll stop the recording at this point, so that won't be on record. And I just want, before we move to that section, a big thank you to our panelists. It's wonderful to have you in the room. It's just maybe some simple advice on your end, but I think for us it makes a huge difference. So we're very grateful. And I'll stop the recording and then I'll open this.